Okay, in today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to answer the very first exam question that generally appears in the Advanced Higher Geography exam paper. And it is the requirement to draw accurately to scale a suitable site for something that you're being asked to build. In this case, it's a venue for a new arena. And one of the things that you'll always get in these exam papers is a kind of little exam brief, which is very similar to the kind of brief that you saw in higher geography, which tells you some information. And it is important to pay attention to some of the details in there because that might influence the choice of the location. Now, how do you go about drawing on your tracing paper? Well, the first thing is to line up your tracing paper with the Ordnance Survey maps that you are given. And then pay very close attention to the size of the site that you're being asked to develop. In this case, it's 250 meters by 200 meters, okay? And that is the site you're going to have to think about. So drawing the shape is always going to be worth one of your 3 marks, and finding a suitable location for your development is going to be the other 2 marks. So let's consider the most important part, which is how do we get the size of our shape? Well, on advanced higher maps, you generally are working with a 1 to 25,000 scale. What that means is one grid square, unlike the maps that you've seen so far at National 5 and higher, one grid square is likely to be 4 centimeters to 1 kilometer. Okay. And I find this little part of the scale really useful because each of these little dashes represents 100 meters. Now, if we think about this question for a second, this was 200 by 250. So the size of the shape that we're drawing should have one side this long, it should be a rectangle, and the other side should be this long because that's 300 meters. So it's a fairly small shape that we're going to be drawing on our map. It should be drawn with a ruler and drawn in pencil. So you draw nice clear sides to it, and you can rub it out if you make a slight mistake or if you change your decision in terms of the location you want to place it. Okay, so now let's have a little look at how we might approach this. Well, the first thing is we have to look across our map. Think about if there's any requirements that the brief has given us about where we need to choose. And I would be always thinking for most developments, although not all, it really depends what the development is, so pay attention to it. But you're looking for very good access, transportation access. That's the first thing. You're also going to be looking for a flat landscape, more than likely. So you don't want much of a gradient, no more than maybe one contour, unless the development suggests something different. Maybe a steep landscape might be appropriate for a few developments, but more than likely, you're going to be looking for a flat area to put your site on. And you're going to want to consider the drainage. So you're probably not going to want to pick a site that's got a stream or marsh or is at the bottom of a slope and might suffer from flooding. So those are kind of the 3 sort of top tips. And what's very important is the site you draw, it shouldn't really have anything else on it. So for the majority of these questions, those are the kind of 3 key conditions. So let's have a little look at how we might go about doing this. So let's say we've decided on this location here, okay? And we know exactly how big we're going to draw our shape because we've looked at the key and we've used a ruler. So we've figured out how big our shape's going to be. And what we then draw is our clear shape like this on our tracing paper. And let's just say that that is 200 meters and that is 300 meters because I've measured it very closely against the scale. And that's my shape there. You probably want to shade it in so it's clearly clear on your tracing paper. Why would have this been a good site? Well, it's got some disadvantages to be fair, but it does have some key things. It's got access to a motorway where there is a junction, so people can come off the motorway onto an A580. It's almost flat, therefore the development costs are going to be pretty limited. It's uphill from this stream, so there's no issue about likely flooding from this, and it's a very small stream anyway, so there's no significant flood risk. There are some very obvious problems with choosing a site like this, but it's just to illustrate how you approach answering this question. So if we go back and have a look at the question, we have traced onto our tracing paper a shape that had one edge at 250 and the other at 200, formulating a rectangle. Not all questions require it to be a clear rectangle. It might be an area. So for example, 100 meters by 100 meters is one kilometre is 100 meters squared. So if that's the area of land that they're wanting you, then that would be the sizes. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but for the majority of questions, they're going to be quite explicit in the size of the shape. Be mindful, just as a top tip, to consider the next question, which generally is where you need to write either on a piece of paper as a fully written answer, or you need to add them as detailed annotations to your map, pointing to those things, the advantages and the disadvantages. So this choice should never be made until you've considered what you're going to be writing about for your second question. So we just have a quick little think about that in terms of the site we've chosen. We might be saying an advantage, depending on what it was, but let's say it's something that's going to employ people. Well, there's a housing area here, and therefore people who live here are going to get the benefit of the jobs. The downside is if there might be a lot of disruption and noise. It might have increased traffic levels, which might affect residents here. There's a nature reserve here that's going to create problems and possible conflicts with people who want to protect the environment versus any problems that might be generated by this new development, and so on. That's the kind of the considerations you would be thinking about, alongside the reasons you chose the site in the first place, which is to do with a flat landscape, access to main motorways, and a limited flood risk. So very little flood prevention is going to need to be put in to defend this site in case of heavy rainfall.